The winds of Valar screamed through crystalline valleys, where twin moons bathed the snow in ghostly shades of violet. At the edge of the frozen wastelands, in a dying village swallowed by ice, a widow knelt beside the ashes of a dead fire. Her skin, once a deep royal purple, was cracked from cold, and her golden eyes had dulled to faint embers. In her trembling arms lay a small child, wrapped in worn, threadbare cloth. Her in-laws had taken everything: food, shelter, dignity, even the honor of her late mate's name. They left her to perish beneath alien stars, believing no one would mourn her loss, believing no one would come. But across the ridge, a lone figure trudged through the snow. His boots crushed the ice, his breath fogged the air like smoke. What he was about to do would defy every law of two worlds, and spark a love that no boundary in the galaxy could contain. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We read every message and we love hearing from you. The village of Kith clung to the mountainside like a scar across Valar's frozen skin. Its homes were carved from dark volcanic stone, their windows faintly glowing with threads of bioluminescent moss that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air was thick with the sharp scent of sulfur and pine-like frost, so cold it would burn human lungs. Above, the sky churned with violet and gray clouds twisting around the twin moons, Velith and Saros as they rose over the jagged peaks, but Lyra was not human. She was Velani, her purple skin smooth yet hardened by Valar's gravity and thin atmosphere, her golden eyes sharp and intelligent, her pointed ears folding back whenever fear took hold. Now, after 2 days without food or heat, even her resilient body was fading. She sat outside what had once been her home, now barred from within. Her daughter, Mira, barely 4 cycles old, slept fitfully in her arms, her tiny body shivering beneath layers of worn fabric. Mira's skin was a lighter violet, still soft with youth, her small ears pressed flat against her skull. From inside, muffled voices drifted through the stone walls. Her late mate's family, the elders of House Valerius, spoke in low, deliberate tones. She couldn't hear every word, but their meaning was clear. They had declared her Cathara, outcast, a widow with no male kin, no dowry to reclaim, no worth to the house. Worse still, they blamed her for Tauren's death. Tauren had perished 6 months earlier on a colony transport mission, ambushed by pirates near the border systems. The convoy had carried vital medical supplies for an outpost when the raiders attacked. Most of the crew escaped in pods, but Tauren stayed behind, piloting the crippled transport away from the civilians, drawing enemy fire until his ship vanished in a blinding explosion that lit up the void. He had died a hero, but his family turned his sacrifice into her curse. They said she had doomed him by bearing a daughter first. They said her weakness had poisoned his spirit and led him to destruction. It was superstition, an old cruel lie. But on Valar, when elders spoke lies, they became law. Lyra had begged them to listen. She had fallen to her knees in the Great Hall, holding out Tauren's final message, a holographic recording sent hours before his death. His voice was calm, his face serene. "I will return to you, my heart. Hold Mira close. Tell her I love her. I love you both, more than the stars themselves." But Kai's Tauren's mother had turned her face away. And Draven, his brother, had only laughed, a hollow, cutting sound that echoed through the cold stone hall. "You are nothing without him," Draven had said, his amber eyes gleaming with contempt. Draven's words dripped with malice. "And you will leave with nothing." And they made good on that promise. Everything Tauren had ever built, the house crafted with his own hands, the savings from years of piloting, the winter food stores he had set aside, even the smallest mementos were stripped away. His ceremonial blade, his flight journals, the star-glass pendant he had gifted her on their bonding day, all gone. When Lyra refused to leave Kith, when she pleaded merely for shelter in the communal halls, the elders had denied her. Kais herself had spoken the sentence, her voice like frozen iron. Let the cold teach her humility. Let her learn what it means to live without the protection of a house. And so Lyra sat in the snow, her back pressed against the rough stone wall of what had once been her home, waiting for something, though she no longer knew what. Death, perhaps. Or some miracle she'd long since stopped believing in. The universe had already shown her its cruelty. Mercy was a language she no longer understood. In her arms, Mira stirred, whimpering softly in her sleep. Lyra looked down at her daughter's tiny face, the same strong jaw as her father, the same golden eyes as her own. Her heart ached. She pressed a trembling kiss to the child's forehead. "I'm sorry," she whispered in the Velani tongue. "I tried, little star. I tried to protect you." The wind rose, shrieking through the narrow streets like a vengeful spirit. Snow began to fall, slow, heavy flakes clinging to her hair and shoulders, layering over her like a shroud. Lyra closed her eyes, drew Mira closer, and began to sing. It was an old lullaby, one her own mother had once sung when the nights were long and cruel. "Sleep, little one, beneath the twin lights. Dream of warmth through the coldest nights. The stars will watch. The moons will keep until the dawn wakes you from sleep." Her voice broke on the final note. Tears froze as they traced down her cheeks. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were almost upon her. Lyra's eyes flew open. A shadow loomed at the edge of the dim glow cast by the moss lamps. A tall, broad-shouldered figure wrapped in a gray thermal cloak, the fabric dusted with snow. Human. She could tell by his shape, by the way he moved, by the soft mechanical hiss of a rebreather mask, converting Valar's thin air into something his lungs could bear. Her pulse quickened. Humans were rare on Valar. Most avoided the planet. Too cold, too remote, too knotted in ancient clan politics that no outsider could ever hope to understand. The few who came were either traders looking to exploit its mineral veins, or mercenaries hired to fight the endless feuds between houses. Neither kind had ever brought her anything but pain. The figure stepped closer, and the faint light caught his face. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 cycles by human measure, though their kind always seemed older in the eyes. His skin was sun-bronzed, weathered by harsh winds, his face marked with quiet endurance. His eyes, dark, nearly black, held not pity, but something deeper. Recognition. Sorrow. He wore the gray fatigues of the Terran Colonial Defense Force, reinforced with lightweight armor across his chest and shoulders. A sidearm rested at his hip, and a faded red medic's insignia was stitched on his right sleeve. His cloak was torn, patched with mismatched fabric, proof of long campaigns in unforgiving places. He stopped a few paces from her. His gaze flicked from Lyra to the sleeping child in her arms, then to the barricaded doorway behind her. His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath the skin. Then softly, his voice rough but steady, he spoke. "Are you hurt?" The soldier's voice was low and careful, his words spoken in accented but fluent Velani. His tone carried the awkward rhythm of someone who had learned the language from recordings, not from the mouths of natives, but the meaning was unmistakable. Lyra stared at him, too drained to feel fear. Or hope. She shook her head slowly. "Not yet," she whispered, her voice brittle from cold and silence. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days, only to Mira, murmuring lullabies and soft reassurances she no longer believed herself. The soldier's dark eyes flicked toward the barricaded door again, then back to her. His expression hardened. "How long have you been out here?" 2 days, she said faintly. A flicker crossed his face, anger or perhaps grief. He crouched to her level, the snow crunching beneath his boots. In the pale light, Lyra could see a thin scar tracing from his ear down to his jaw, a mark of some old battle. And in his eyes she saw something deeper, weariness, the kind born from witnessing too much pain, from losing too many people. "My name is Elias," he said quietly. "I'm stationed at the human outpost 15 kilometers south. I was on patrol when I saw you." Lyra said nothing. What was there to say? That she was dying? That her daughter would die too, frozen and forgotten in a village that had turned its back on them? That the universe was cruel and his arrival here changed nothing? Elias seemed to understand her silence. He reached into his pack and pulled out a thermal blanket, thin, metallic, and faintly shimmering, its fibers laced with heating filaments. He unfolded it carefully. "May I?" he asked, nodding toward Mira. Lyra hesitated. Instinct screamed at her to protect her child, to trust no one, not even this stranger with kind eyes and a soldier's scars. But Mira was shaking violently now, her lips tinged with blue. If she did nothing, her daughter would not survive the night. Slowly, she nodded. Elias moved closer, his movements deliberate and gentle. He draped the blanket over them both, tucking the edges carefully around Mira's small body. The warmth hit like a shock so sudden it almost hurt. Lyra gasped softly as life crept back into her frozen skin. Her trembling fingers pulled the blanket tighter around her child. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Elias only nodded. Then he stood, turning his gaze once more toward the barricaded door. His jaw tightened. His hand hovered near the entrance as if ready to knock or break it down, but then he stopped. His fingers curled into a fist, and when he finally spoke, his voice trembled with restrained fury. "Who did this to you?" Lyra's throat tightened. Shame burned in her chest despite the freezing air. "My mate's family," she murmured. "I am nothing to them now." Elias was silent for a long moment. Then his voice came, quiet but unyielding. "You're not nothing." Lyra's head lifted, startled. Their eyes met, and for the first time in days she saw something she thought had vanished from the universe. Belief. Not pity, not judgment. Just belief in her and her right to exist, to matter, to live. Before she could respond, the door behind her scraped open, a harsh grind of wood on stone. Draven stood in the doorway, tall and imposing, his amber eyes narrowing as they fell on Elias. Warm light spilled from behind him, casting his silhouette in sharp relief. His lips curled into a sneer. Pure arrogance twisting his face. "What is this?" he spat. "A human. Here?" Elias straightened slowly, one hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. His posture was calm, but his eyes, cold and dark, never left Draven. He said nothing. Elias didn't move, but his gaze locked onto Draven's, unflinching and steady. The air between them crackled with quiet defiance. Draven stepped forward, boots crunching through the snow, his breath clouding in the freezing air. "This is Veilani business, human. You have no place here." Elias tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "I'm making it my business." The words struck like steel, sharp, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Draven's sneer wavered. For the briefest instant, Lyra saw something flicker in his amber eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear, but it vanished almost instantly, replaced by cold arrogance and the simmering fury of a man whose authority had been challenged. "You will regret this," Draven said quietly, his hand sliding toward the hilt of the ceremonial blade at his belt. Elias's lips curved into a thin, humorless smile. "I doubt it." The tension thickened, electric as Draven's fingers brushed the weapon's grip. Lyra's heart hammered in her chest. It hit her then, sudden and absolute, that this soldier before her wasn't afraid, and that single truth changed everything. Draven's hand hovered over the blade, a curved weapon forged from pure Veilani steel, its edge sharp enough to cut through bone. It was more than a weapon. It was a symbol, the authority of House Valerius, a reminder of their power over the village. Elias stood motionless, his hand resting casually near his sidearm, his stance balanced and ready. "You'd draw a blade on me?" he asked quietly. "In front of a widow and her child?" Draven's lip curled. "You are an outsider. You do not understand our ways." "I understand enough," Elias replied. "Do you?" Draven took another step closer, his voice rising. "That female is Cathara, outcast. She has no claim to this house. You're a fool for wasting your time on her." Lyra flinched at the word, but Elias's jaw clenched, his eyes burning cold. "If she's nothing," he said softly. "Why are you so afraid of her?" Draven froze. "Afraid of her?" "Yes." Elias stepped forward, his tone turning sharp. "You barricaded your door against a starving woman and her child. You stole what little they had. That's not strength, Draven. That's cowardice." A murmur rippled through the gathered villagers, shadows in the doorways, faces peering from dim windows. Draven's face darkened, his anger barely contained. "You dare, I dare." Elias cut him off. "And I'll keep daring until you stop hiding behind your family's name and face the truth." "What truth?" Draven hissed. "That you're terrified of what she represents," Elias said, voice low but carrying through the cold. "She's lost everything. Her home, her name, her place in this world, and she's still here, still fighting for her daughter. And you? You take from the weak because you're too afraid to stand against the strong." The murmurs grew louder, spreading through the crowd like wind through dry reeds. Draven's hand tightened around his blade. "You insult me. By Veilani law, I could kill you where you stand." "By whose authority?" Elias asked, gesturing toward the villagers. "Because I don't think they're as convinced as you are." A new voice cut through the air. "Enough, Draven. The crowd parted as Kais emerged from the house. Tall, regal, her violet skin traced with silver tattoos that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Her golden eyes swept over the scene, measured, calculating. Draven stepped back immediately, his posture stiff with restrained anger. Kais moved past him, her gaze settling on Elias. "You are bold, human," she said. "Bold and foolish." Elias met her eyes without hesitation. "Then explain it to me. Explain why a widow and child deserve to die in the snow." Kais's eyes narrowed. "She is Cathara." "I know what that means," Elias said. "But laws are only as just as those who enforce them. And right now this doesn't look like justice, it looks like murder." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. Kais's expression hardened. "You are not Velani. You have no voice in our affairs, then give me one." Kais tilted her head, voice cold. "What do you propose?" "A trial," Elias said firmly, "public. Let the village decide if she's truly Cathara, or if your house is twisting tradition into cruelty." The crowd murmured louder now, whispers rising like wind. Kai studied him, her expression unreadable, then nodded once. "Very well," she said. "A trial, tomorrow at midday." Her gaze hardened like stone. "But if you lose, human, you will leave this place and never return." "And she?" "Face the consequences." Kais finished coldly. Elias nodded once. "And if I win, she stays. House Valerius provides her and her daughter shelter and food." He extended his hand. "Deal?" Kais didn't take it. She turned away. "Tomorrow, midday, don't be late." Then she disappeared inside, Draven following her with venom in his eyes. As the crowd began to scatter, Elias knelt beside Lyra. "You all right?" Lyra's voice trembled. "What have you done?" "What I had to. The elders won't let you win," she whispered. "Then we'll find a way to make them." He gave her a small, tired smile. "Trust me." When she looked into his eyes, all she saw was determination, hard and unyielding. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "Because someone has to." He rose and offered his hand. "Come on, let's get you somewhere warm." Lyra hesitated, then took it. As he pulled her up, a fragile spark of hope stirred within her. The first she'd felt in years. No one believed a human could challenge Velani law. Yet the silence that followed Elias's promise rippled through the village like a gathering storm. Elias led Lyra and Mira to a small outbuilding, on the village edge near an old storage shed with cracked walls and a broken latch. He pushed the door open. "It's not much," he said, "but it'll keep out the wind." Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood. Elias unpacked supplies from his bag, a portable heater, ration packs, water, and a medical kit. The heater's soft hum filled the room as warmth slowly spread. Lyra sank beside it. "Thank you." Elias handed her food. "Eat. You'll need your strength tomorrow." Lyra divided the portion with Mira. Elias sat across from them, watching quietly. "Tell me about Torin," he said at last. She froze. "Why?" "Because I need to understand. If I'm going to defend you, I have to know who he was." Lyra's throat tightened. "Torin was kind, stronger than anyone I knew, but kind. He didn't care that I came from a lower clan. He chose me anyway." "That didn't sit well with his family, did it?" Elias asked. "They tried to stop the bonding, but Torin refused. When he died, they saw their chance to be rid of me." "What happened to him?" "He was leading a transport convoy. Pirates attacked. Most survived, but Torin stayed behind to cover their escape. He was killed protecting them." Elias's jaw tightened. "He was a hero." "He was," Lyra said softly, "but his family doesn't see it that way. They say I cursed him, that he died because I bore a daughter first." Elias frowned. "That's insane. It's tradition. A son means power. A daughter means weakness. When that's not tradition," he muttered. "That's cruelty." Lyra looked down. "It's the way things are. And tomorrow Kais will use that same law to destroy me." "Not if I can help it," Elias said firmly. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've seen this before. The powerful always twist tradition to serve themselves. But there's always someone who stands up eventually." Lyra wanted to believe him. "Tell me about you," she said quietly. "Why are you even here?" "I'm part of a medical relief unit," Elias replied. "We rotate between colonies. Valar was next on the list. Harsh weather, scarce supplies. I was on patrol when I found you." She studied him. "You've lost someone too, haven't you?" He looked away. Yeah, a long time ago. I'm sorry, don't be. It taught me something. Life's too short to stand by and do nothing. Lyra's voice softened. Why do you care so much? Ilias met her eyes. Because you deserve to be cared for. The words lingered between them like warmth after firelight. Lyra blinked back tears. Thank you for everything. Elias stood. I'll be back in the morning. Try to rest. Where are you going? To prepare, he said, glancing toward the snow-lit night. Tomorrow we'll show them what justice really looks like. He stepped out into the cold. Lyra gathered Mira into her arms and stared at the flickering heater. Hope, fragile but real, began to burn inside her, and when dawn came, that hope would be tested. The trial was held beneath Valar's twin moons, their pale light washing over the village square. The platform of carved stone bore the sigils of House Valerius. The elders sat in a semicircle, their robes heavy with frost and authority. Lyra stood at the edge, Mira in her arms, wrapped in tattered ceremonial robes. She looked small, breakable, until Elias appeared walking through the murmuring crowd. Every step he took toward the platform felt like defiance. Tomorrow had come, and with it, the reckoning. Elias walked through the gathered crowd with calm, steady strides. The villagers parted silently, their eyes following him as he made his way to the platform where Lyra stood waiting. He stopped beside her. Ready? Lyra nodded faintly. Together, they stepped onto the stone dais beneath the twin moons. Kais rose, her presence commanding. We are gathered, she declared, to judge Lyra, widow of Tauren Valerius. She stands accused of violating the sacred bond and bringing dishonor upon House Valerius. She has been declared Cathara. Then her gaze shifted to Elias. Yet this human dares to challenge our judgment. Let him speak, Elias stepped forward. His voice was steady but carried across the cold air like a blade. I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here to ask a question. What is the purpose of law? Kais's eyes narrowed. To maintain order. To preserve the clan's strength. And does this law truly make your clan stronger? It removes weakness, Draven snapped, stepping forward. She is a burden. Elias turned to him. A burden? Or a reminder in need of sacrifice, of courage? He looked toward the crowd. Tauren Valerius died protecting others. And this is how you honor him? By casting out his widow and child? A murmur rippled through the villagers. Kais's tone hardened. Tauren's death was tragic, but Lyra failed him. She bore a daughter first, Elias's voice sharpened. She bore life, a child who carries Tauren's blood. And you call that failure? It is tradition, Kais said coldly. Tradition. Elias turned to face the crowd. How many of you have daughters? How many of you love them, protect them? Yet you stand silent while this child is condemned for being born. The murmuring grew louder, uneasy. Words do not change truth, Kais said, her voice slicing through the air. Lyra is Cathara because she has no claim. Her mate is dead. She has no kin to speak for her. Elias's answer was simple and devastating. She has me. The square fell silent. Even the wind seemed to still. Kais stared. What? She has me, Elias repeated. I will stand for her. I will speak as her kin. Draven surged forward. You cannot. You are not Velani. No, Ilias said calmly. I'm human. A citizen of the Terran Colonial Alliance, an ally of Valar under treaty law. And under that treaty I invoke Jetkara, the law of sanctuary. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jetkara, an ancient, almost forgotten rite, allowed an outsider to claim kinship with a Velani in need. Rarely invoked. Never by a human. But still it was law. Kais went pale. This is unprecedented, not illegal, Elias countered. Unless, of course, you're willing to violate your own laws. Her jaw tightened. Very well. You've invoked Jetkara, human. But if you claim kinship, you also claim responsibility. Her debts become yours. Her dishonor becomes yours. Elias nodded. I understand. A cold smile curved Kais's lips. Then let us test your claim. She motioned to an attendant who stepped forward with a small black box. Kais opened it, revealing a shard of starglass. A cherith. A truth stone. This will reveal the bond between souls. If your claim is genuine, the stone will glow. Elias took the shard carefully. He turned to Lyra. Trust me. Her hand trembled as she reached for his. Their palms met, and in that instant, the stone blazed with light. A brilliant radiance flooded the square, washing over the villagers, reflecting in their wide eyes. Gasps and murmurs broke out all around. When the light faded, the starglass still glowed, and softly, steadily, in Elias's hand. Kai's smile vanished. Draven's mouth fell open. The elders exchanged uncertain glances. Elias looked up. "Is that proof enough?" Silence fell again, deeper this time. The air itself felt charged, as if something ancient had awakened. Lyra stared at their joined hands, the glowing stone between them, a captured star burning in their palms. Something had changed. Everyone could feel it. Kai snatched the stone away, her composure cracking. "This proves nothing," she snapped. "The Cherith responds to emotion, not truth." "Then what would prove it?" Elias asked evenly. Kai's turned to the Council of Elders. They conferred in low tones before the eldest among them. Sarvok, a towering figure draped in silver robes, rose slowly. "If the human claims kinship through Jetkara," he said, his voice deep as thunder, "then he must bear its full weight. He must know the deceased. He must speak Torin Valerius's legacy as if it were his own." He fixed his piercing gaze on Elias. "Tell us, human, who was Torin Valerius?" Lyra's breath caught. He can't possibly know, but Elias didn't hesitate. "Torin Valerius was born in this village," he said. "Under the twin moons during the coldest winter Valor had seen in 50 cycles. His mother feared he wouldn't survive the night. But he did." Lyra's eyes widened. "He spoke as if he'd known Torin himself. He grew strong despite the hunger and the cold," Elias continued. "He trained as a pilot, one of the best. But he didn't fly for glory or rank. He flew to protect, to bring food, medicine, hope." The crowd had gone utterly still. Case's eyes flickered with unease. "How do you know this?" Elias met her gaze. "Because I've read the reports. I've spoken to the soldiers who survived. And because men like Torin leave stories behind." He turned toward Lyra. "Stories worth fighting for." The crowd murmured again, louder this time, with something different in their voices. Respect, wonder, doubt toward their own rulers. And for the first time, Kai's looked uncertain. Elias's voice carried across the square, calm but resolute. Torin stayed behind to protect others. When the transports were attacked, he didn't run. He held the line so 63 civilians could escape. Before the end, he sent a final transmission. He said he loved them, and he asked that someone look after Lyra and Mira, because they were his heart. Lyra's breath caught. Tears welled in her golden eyes and slipped down her cheeks. Those were Torin's exact words. Elias turned toward Kai's, his tone hardening. "But you didn't honor that last request. So I'll ask again. Is this how you repay a hero?" No one spoke. The square was utterly silent. Elder Sarvok leaned forward. "How do you know these things, human?" Elias reached into his pack and pulled out a small data tablet. Torin's final mission log is public record. His transmission was archived by convoy survivors. He activated the screen, displaying the recorded message. Torin's voice echoed faintly, raw, broken, real. Elias lowered the device. "The only ones who forgot his legacy are those who claim to honor him." Draven rose sharply. "You have no right." "I have every right," Elias cut in, his voice sharp as steel. "Because I claimed kinship. And kinship isn't just blood, it's memory. It's standing for those who can't. It's honoring the dead by protecting the living." A murmur spread through the crowd, louder this time, less fearful, more alive. Some nodded. Others exchanged uncertain glances. But none spoke against him. Case's hands trembled at her sides. "You think you've won?" Elias met her gaze without flinching. "I think a tradition that makes you cruel instead of strong isn't worth keeping." The words struck like thunder. Kai's turned sharply to the elders. "Enough, the council must vote." The elders conferred in low tones, their faces grave. Finally, Sarvok stood. "The council has deliberated. In light of the evidence presented and the invocation of Jetkara, we rule, Lyra of House Valerius is no longer Cathara. Her status and honor are restored. House Valerius will provide her and her child with shelter and sustenance." The crowd erupted. Cheers and tears broke through the frozen air. Lyra's knees buckled from relief, and Elias caught her before she fell. She clutched his arm, sobbing. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias shook his head softly. It's not over yet. Kai stood rigid, fury burning behind her composed mask. Very well. The elders have spoken, but know this, human. You've made an enemy of House Valerius. We do not forget. Elias met her gaze steadily. Neither do I. Kais turned sharply and strode away, her cloak trailing behind her like a storm. The elders dispersed, the villagers whispering in awe and disbelief. An old man approached hesitantly. I remember Torin, he said, voice shaking. He once saved my son. I should have spoken up sooner. I'm sorry. Lyra nodded wordlessly, tears glistening in her eyes. Elias guided her down from the platform. They walked back through the snow in silence, the village lights dim behind them. At the small outbuilding where she'd been staying, Lyra turned to face him. You saved us, she said softly. I don't know how to repay you. You don't owe me anything, Elias replied. I do, she whispered. You risked everything, why? He paused, his breath misting in the cold. Because it was right, Lyra held his gaze. Something warm, fragile, and terrifying stirred in her chest. Elias took a step back. Get some rest. You'll need it, but Lyra reached out, catching his wrist. Stay, she said quietly. Please. Elias looked at her for a long moment, searching her eyes, seeing the fear, the exhaustion, and the flicker of trust that had returned after so long. Slowly he nodded. All right, I'll stay. They went inside together. The door closed behind them. The trial had ended, but the true reckoning was only beginning. Days passed in uneasy peace. House Valerius honored the decree, though barely. They gave Lyra a small dwelling near the edge of the village and minimal rations. No one spoke to her, but she was no longer shunned. Mira was warm. She laughed again. Elias visited every evening. He brought food, medicine, and sometimes small toys for Mira. The little girl had begun calling him Eli. Lyra watched the two of them together, Elias's patience, his quiet gentleness, and each time she felt something stir that frightened her as much as it comforted her. She had loved once. She had lost once. But Elias made it difficult not to believe again. On the fourth night, Elias arrived late, his brow furrowed. What's wrong? Lyra asked. Command's questioning why I invoked Jetkara, he said, running a hand through his hair. I have to go back to the outpost. File reports. Deal with the bureaucracy. Lyra felt a sharp ache in her chest, a fear she didn't want to name. Elias touched her shoulder gently. I'll come back. I promise. Why do you care so much? She whispered. He hesitated, then said quietly, because when I look at you, I see someone who survived the impossible, someone who never stopped fighting, and I think that's worth protecting. Lyra's breath caught. She placed her hand over his. For a moment, the world went still. Their eyes locked, hearts pounding. Then Mira's voice broke the silence. Eli, look. She held up a small paper bird she'd folded herself. Elias smiled, kneeling down. That's beautiful. Mira beamed and pressed it into his palm. For you. So you don't forget us. Elias's smile softened. I could never forget. Lyra watched him, her heart full. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to hope. But beyond the walls of that tiny home, the winds of Valar whispered a different truth. House Valerius was not finished, and soon something buried in Torin's legacy would return to change everything. Remember? Mira said softly, placing the paper bird in Elias's hand. I won't forget, he promised. Mira hugged him tightly. Lyra watched them, her heart aching with warmth and fear all at once. Then the door slammed open. Draven stood there, fury twisting his face, two armed men flanking him. Get away from them, he barked. Elias rose slowly, stepping between them and Lyra. This is her home. You have no right to be here, no right? Draven sneered. You humiliated my family and now you think you can just walk away? I think you should leave, Elias replied calmly. Before you do something you'll regret. Draven's laughter was harsh. The only regret I have is not ending this sooner. He drew his blade. Lyra gasped, pulling Mira behind her. Elias stood unarmed, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. You really want to attack a Terran soldier? He said quietly. That's an act of war. Draven's grin faltered. Not if there are no witnesses. The two men moved to close the door. Elias gestured to the corner. Except for the security feed. Draven froze. What? The camera, Elias said, pointing. Everything you just said is being transmitted to the Terran outpost right now. Draven's face went pale. One of the men shifted uneasily. Draven, if he's telling the truth, he's lying. Draven snapped. Want to take that chance? Elias asked. Explain to your council why you murdered their ally. That ends with orbital bombardment. Draven's hands trembled. Finally, with a snarl, he sheathed the blade. This isn't over. Yes, Elias said evenly, it is. Draven stormed out. His men followed. Silence fell. Lyra collapsed to her knees, trembling. Elias knelt beside her. Are you all right? The camera, she asked breathlessly. Was it real? Elias smiled faintly. No. Lyra let out a shaky laugh, half sob, half relief. You're insane. Maybe, he said, smiling, but it worked. Lyra reached up, cupping his face gently. Thank you. Again. Elias covered her hand. You don't have to keep thanking me. I do, she whispered. Because I don't know what I'd do without you. The words hung between them, heavy and real. Elias leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. Lyra's breath hitched. Lyra, Eli, Mira's small voice interrupted. Are you my family now? Elias froze. He looked to Lyra. She nodded through tears. Yes, he said softly. I am. Mira smiled and threw her arms around him. He held her close. Lyra watched, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in months, she felt home and outside. No one dared laugh anymore, because they understood what they had witnessed, a bond stronger than blood. 2 months later, Kith had changed, not in structure but in spirit. The trial had exposed a truth. Tradition without compassion is cruelty. Lyra had become a quiet symbol. Other widows spoke up. The elders resisted, but their power had weakened. Villagers brought food, gifts, even apologies. Forgiveness came slowly, but it came. Elias returned weakly. His superiors had reviewed his actions, but chose not to punish him. The Terran Alliance released a statement. Cultural respect does not mean tolerating injustice. That night, Elias sat by the fire. Mira slept against his chest. Lyra sat across from him, tea in hand. She talks about you constantly, Lyra said with a smile. Then her expression grew serious. The elders approached me. They want to make you part of House Valerius. It's never been done before. But if you accept, you'll belong to us, bound to this house, this village. She hesitated. I won't ask unless it's what you truly want. Elias looked at Mira, sleeping peacefully, then at Lyra, the warmth in her eyes, the life returning to her face. He thought of his own loneliness, the cold silence of outposts, the meaning he'd found here. I want it, he said. All of it. Lyra's eyes shimmered. She knelt beside him, taking his hand. Are you sure? Once you say yes, there's no going back. You'll be ours and we'll be yours. Elias kissed her hand gently. I've never been more certain. Lyra leaned in, her forehead resting against his. I love you, she whispered. I didn't mean to, but I do. Elias cupped her face. I love you too, both of you, Mira stirred. Eli, Mama. Lyra smiled through tears. Everything's all right, little star. Eli, stay. Elias smiled softly. Yes, I'm staying. The night wind howled outside, but inside their small home it was warm. Epilogue. 6 months later, the story of Elias and Lyra spread beyond Valar. Across colonies, people spoke of the human soldier who invoked an ancient Vailani law to save a widow and child. He had stood against tradition and stayed to build something new. The Terran Alliance and Vailani. High Council took notice. Delegates visited Kith, studied the change, and soon issued a decree. Jetkara would become a recognized framework for interspecies kinship. Humans and Vailani could now claim bonds, across stars, across hearts. Lyra stood on the ridge above Kith, the cold wind brushing her hair. Elias held Mira on his shoulders. That one, Mama, Mira said, pointing to the sky. The bright one. That's Valar's sun, Lyra said softly. And that one? Elias smiled. That's Sol Earth Star, where I'm from. Can we go there? Mira asked. Elias looked at Lyra. She nodded. Someday. I'll show you the oceans, Elias said. The forests, Mira giggled. I love you, Eli. I love you too, little star. Lyra took Elias's hand. The wind was cold, but their warmth defied it. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Staying? Elias smiled. Not for a second. Lyra kissed him softly. Mama and Eli sitting in a tree. Mira sang. They laughed as they walked back hand in hand, stars burning bright above them. Because sometimes in a universe built on arrogance, a single act of dignity can shift the stars themselves. And sometimes love is the strongest law of all.